Hello, I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to a very exciting CSGO news episode. I hope you guys all enjoyed. There are some very cool stories and also some weird stories out there today, but I hope you guys all enjoy. As always, welcome back to the Esports Talk Show, and we're going to talk a lot about CSGO today. All stories will be timestamped down below as usual, and let's hop into our first one though. As announced just this morning, it will be Snax, who has officially been benched by that Mousesports roster, and it will be Styko in turn, actually returning to that Mousesports roster for the first time in just 4 months. It was Snax who replaced him, and now vice versa. He gets a little bit of his payback, guys. Confirmed this morning, it will be Styko returning to that starting roster. Now, it does, of course, ultimately ask the question, where will Snax end up? Of course, there's many rumors out there right now with HS and ENCE out there, and some sort of mixed team, which of course will acquire Snax. And besides a mixed team, you really have to wonder how hard he would actually fall in this Polish system. Of course, he probably would not return back to Virtus Pro, although Virtus Pro looking to make changes. Let's talk about, I guess, kind of roll into our next story here, all about Pasha. We've known for quite some time the man has been tweeting out some mysterious things, maybe foreshadowing to a future of retirement from CSGO, or maybe full-time streaming, which we all probably hope for. And it does seem, of course, just last week, he did post this, apparently having his worst week, and a statement would be soon. He has yet to actually make that statement as to what that might be, but it does beg the question, will Snax go back to a Virtus Pro? You have to say it's probably highly unlikely after those bridges were burned or those negotiations were made. Will he join some mixed team? I'd say probably most likely. Who will that mixed team be? How good will they be? Will they be the ex-Tempo Storm guys, which is probably as expected? Again, going to be big news here coming soon. And alongside that, of course, talking about Pasha, he has yet to make his statement. It really makes you wonder where Virtus Pro is at. If you guys have seen the results this past week, they lost a match in Mountain Dew League to a team known as Existence Galaxy. Not only losing the match, but actually losing quite brutally 16-3. And the next game they played in ECS, they then go 16 rounds in a row against G2. So a team who really seems to be bipolar, not only in their results, in their gameplay, in their chemistry. Who knows what the future is going to be for Snax or Virtus Pro, but that was in first, of course, biggest news for CSGO this morning. And speaking of big surprises, we actually had for the first time, I really was shocked by this, guys. It was Star Series Season 6, and we'll talk about viewership a little bit later on here as well. It was our premier tournament this last week, and for the first time in a long time, I was surprised to see both these teams in the finals. There were probably 6 favorite teams going into it. NRG, maybe a Gambit, given how they've been kind of bipolar as well with their results, maybe other teams alongside them. NRG was probably one of your biggest favorites here alongside Big Clan. They both go out in playoffs pretty early on, although NRG did make the semifinals, but it was actually ENCE versus Vegas Squadron in the grand finals best of 5, and it was ENCE taking their first premier tournament title ever in the history of the organization, which is absolutely amazing to see. If you guys remember back to the European qualifier for the closed qualifier, that is for our last major, they almost made it through. They definitely had a chance to go through. Everyone's a big ENCE fan out there ever since Alu did return to that Finnish roster, and it's very cool to see as well a team like this finally succeed where they deserve it. You know, it's finally the grind does pay off, and again the results do prove themselves. Again, I'm not going to say it's a premier, of course it was a premier tournament prize pool wise, not your top talent. I believe of your top 8 teams, probably 4 or 5 of them were actually not there. A lot of teams after the major actually skipped Star Series because of roster changes, rest, that kind of stuff as well. It was teams like Na'Vi and SK and FaZe Clan. Those teams were not here, but still, nonetheless, guys, an impressive victory for ENCE. A best of 3 win against OpTic. They swept them. A best of 1 victory against Mousesports, who again had a pretty rough group stage. And very lastly, a best of 5 victory against Vegas Squadron, who showed up quite well at the major, and it went to map 5. It was an amazing series as well. And very lastly as well, on top of that, last thing we'll say about this, it was 16-year-old Sergey, 16 years old, who earns the MVP and looks very dominant throughout the entire tournament itself. Unfortunately enough, it was the viewership. We actually saw a peak viewership not even break 100,000 viewers. Now, of course, if you guys remember, it was Blackout that came out this weekend. We also had RLCS, the regional championships for Rocket League this weekend. A lot of stuff, and of course, Fortnite Fall Skirmish continues as well. So a lot of stuff going on, but it's usually Star Series that does struggle. It's a tournament I've often felt very bad for because it usually follows a major, which means a lot of teams do not go there. So peak viewership was not the best, but to be quite honest, if you guys are fans of these lower tier teams or these, these towards the back end of top 20 teams, it was actually an amazingly close tournament for especially a best of 5 finals for the first time in a long time, actually going to map 5. So nonetheless, 16-year-old Sergey, easy for ENCE and Alu, and they of course made their nice little party worth it afterwards, after of course sipping out of that trophy. So very cool to see the Finnish boys celebrating, and they definitely deserved it. And in other news, when I said there was very interesting news, this is definitely one of the weirder stories out there. We did actually have apparently an organizational member. It doesn't mean staff or management, maybe one of those two. Apparently a member from a Vanguard actually did send K0nfig some death threats after their loss to ENCE in that best of 3. They were actually swept there in that series. Apparently a Vanguard member actually bet on the series, and he sent these messages to K0nfig via Twitter DMs, which of course was him wishing death upon K0nfig, as well as his family. Now, the alleged rumors out there, nothing confirmed. He's had about $300 bet on the actual series, so he of course just raged really quickly, and instead of the typical rage where you just throw something, he pulled out his phone or went to his computer and actually typed out these messages to K0nfig. So apparently Buster, of course from a Vanguard roster, has actually confirmed that member from the organization has now been fired. He then later on, that being the guy who actually threatened K0nfig and his family to die exactly on October 23rd. Why he chose that date, we will never know. He actually took to Twitter later on and said he was sorry for the instance. It does feel bad. Maybe the guy maybe he had a drink or two, lost a couple $100 on an OpTic Gaming who probably should have been favored in that series. Maybe, you never know, and he just took it a bit too far. Maybe it's a tough situation, but that did happen, and unfortunately enough, a guy was fired for that. But I guess that's what karma is all about. Now, also some big stories out there for Space Soldiers fans. Space Soldiers are now officially free, actually announced by the organization as well as some of their players. They still have buyout clauses, but it's now official. They are finally free from the organization. Once a team out there, an organization actually buys these guys out, if they do buy them out. And again, I know I always say begs the question, but it definitely does in this instance actually make you wonder, will Xantares, obviously by far and away their best player, will he stay with this Turkish roster, or will he go international? Now, it does seem they've been sticking together for, of course, quite some time, approaching, I think, over a couple years or close to that 2-year mark. Will these guys stick together, or will Xantares and them actually part ways? Again, we'll actually have to wait to see if a team actually wants to take a risk on a guy like Xantares. And also, big news. I know we have a lot of big, smaller news out there for all you individual fans. For OpTic India, of course, one of their 3 current CSGO rosters. We've talked about this plenty in the past. The way they diversified the scene has been quite insane. I hope these rosters do last. They, of course, have a European male roster. They now have an Indian male roster, and they also have a Brazilian female roster. So this Indian roster now has actually done some quite significant things over in the Indian scene. This being their first big step up, though, they've actually qualified for ESL Pro League Season 8 Asia, which is a playoff between 4 teams. Those 4 teams will compete for 1 spot in the ESL Pro League Season 8 finals. And again, I don't expect the winner of this to actually make too big of a dent unless it's a Tyloo, and I'm not very sure if India really stand a chance. When you look at their qualifiers, they dominated all the teams they played. They swept both their teams 2-0 in those best of 3s, and I don't think a team actually surpassed 5 or 6 rounds against them, but that's not Tyloo, that's not Vici. In these teams, we're going to actually see the comparison of the skill gap right now. And again, I know a lot of you guys are actually probably Indian fans. I wish them the best of luck. This is definitely a great experience for that squad going forward, because they will probably compete against, as of right now, it's definitely Vici. Vici is qualified #1 out of the Asian scene, and it probably will be Tyloo, although Tyloo is in that losers bracket right now. But it will be probably one of those 2 teams, if not both of them. OpTic India have their work cut out for them, but it should be fun to see if they actually can qualify for their first ESL Pro League finals. But also, very lastly, guys, kind of a sadder story to finish off CSGO news with. It was actually Jesse Cliffe. We talked about this, I think, over a year ago about a possible sexual exploitation of a minor that has actually come to fruition, and he has pleaded guilty to that. So, in good news, I know it's kind of weird transitioning to good news off of that. He has pleaded guilty. He will go to jail for the disgusting things that he has done. It's Jesse Cliffe, the co-founder of Counterstrike, if you did not know the name. So obviously not the best looking brand image right now, but he was released by Valve after the allegations were actually come to fruition about a year ago. And of course, he has now pleaded guilty, and he will be serving time for those terrible acts. But as always, I hope you guys all enjoy. Hopefully happier news tomorrow or sometime Wednesday, of course, for CSGO news. Thank you all for watching here on the Esports Talk, and I'll see you guys all later today if you do want to watch some other esports news out there. But as always, my name is Jake. Remember, I like you, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye.